All right, welcome everyone to Mapping Success, taking digital transformation from concept to realization. This is part two in a series of where, with Market Dojo, we interview and involve clients on the panel to tell us their unique journey and their unique story relative to not just in terms of the utilization of the Market Dojo platform, but even more importantly, how they've been able to work to leverage technology and move forward. And I'm very excited today to welcome the panelists we have. And I'm just going to cue my producer to do the next slide here. Um, Perfect. All right. Now, one thing I just want to talk about, and before we get into this, with COVID-19, one of the things that Market Dojo is doing, and I'm going to turn this over very quickly to Alan Rafiq, who is one of our panelists. Hello, Alan, to talk a little bit about what Market Dojo has done relative to addressing this crisis for their clients and those who utilize their platform. So, Ellen, if I could turn it over just to you for a quick minute or two.
Yeah, I mean, hi there. Thank you. I mean, it's really interesting. We come off the back of one of our best quarters ever with regards to our business. We have a great future in terms of moving forward, helping people with the supply chain. In terms of the short, medium term, there's a lot of uncertainty in the market. I think it's a case of we have some tools that help people work virtually within the supply chain, and we can really help people, and it's trying to find out where we can offer assistance to everyone out there. One of the things that we developed was a free COVID-19 risk awareness RFI. So we've had about 50 clients uptake that. So this is a questionnaire that allows clients to find out where the risks may be in the supply chain by sending this questionnaire out to their suppliers. So if anyone's interested in that, you can just go to our website and hook into that. The other area where we found some success is around just getting more options within the supply chain, and a couple of cases, risk mitigation. A few clients have had issues with suppliers who've hiked up the prices. And so with respect to that, we've helped them with the occasional auction, although most of our clients are looking more to do with risk mitigation and ensuring the continuity of supply. It's a really interesting time. Procurement people are becoming kind of the heroes of organizations. They're really helping organizations when sales are dropping to look at the bottom line. And what we're seeing is a lot of procurement people are working furiously around that. And simply at Market Dojo, we have the tools to help, and we're trying to do the best we can.
Well, it's interesting, and I want to go to the next slide because there's a whole discussion in there, and we'll probably cover this, Corne, with Corne in a little bit more detail. But what people are discovering now is that how do you extract greater value from their existing platforms? It's forcing them to look for ways to save. And one of the things that tweaked my mind is where you're talking about suppliers raising prices was the $15 2-ounce bottle of hand sanitizer that used to be $1.59. And I mean, there are those scenarios certainly that cover in that. But thank you for that. And again, we'll revisit this a little bit. We'll probably touch on this as we get into it. Now, without further delay, I want to turn to welcome Corne Dercksen to the panel. Corne, thank you for joining us. You're head of purchasing for Irdeto and located out of the Netherlands. If you could just give us a little bit of a 1-minute synopsis on you personally, your background from a procurement standpoint.
Thank you, John. Hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Corne Dercksen. I am a South African at heart and born and raised. Moved to the Netherlands to come and join the Irdeto group last year in July. Started officially in August. Irdeto is part of the greater MultiChoice group. So I've basically sort of come over from the MultiChoice group. I've been in procurement for quite some time, or in supply chain actually, for quite some time, in various different roles. But yeah, mostly heading up the purchasing side at Irdeto, which is quite a decent portfolio. I've got a fantastic team behind me, great organization that supports us. And the good thing for us as well, we will work in a organization that's got some fantastic values and core beliefs, and they stick to them. And it comes through whenever we have meetings, whenever there's dealings with our internal stakeholders. It's always something that flows through as a theme.
So you got that sound, would you call values and ways of doing things, sort of a touchstone that keeps everyone on track, regardless of good times or difficult or challenging times in the market, I guess is the safe way to sum it up. Well, Corne, I'm glad you're joining us. I, of course, want to go on to welcoming our next panelist, which is Jon Paul. Jon, how are you today?
I'm great, thanks. Yeah, hi everyone. I am an account manager at Market Dojo, and I've been here for the past couple of years. So dealing with clients around the world. So for example, followed Corne on his journey from multi-choice across to Irdeto. And yeah, so been here for the past couple of years and essentially here for all commercial needs, and obviously also assisting clients when they're setting up the system and getting everything ready to go for their team.
Now, I would imagine during these times that relationship and being involved actively with your clients are important, obviously, because it's not just the technology you're providing, but the expertise in terms of collaborating on the use of that technology. I mean, is that a fair statement, Jon?
Absolutely. Each morning I wake up with a few new meetings surprising me in my calendar. So I'd say account management is become absolutely crucial at the moment, certainly helping people try new things in the tool. A lot of companies are kind of venturing out as we get into this unforeseen time.
Perfect. Well, listen, welcome. I'm looking forward to having your insights and discussion on here as well. And as we bring up the next slide, obviously, we're going to be talking about Ellen, who gave us a few-minute overview of what Market Dojo is doing. But again, Ellen, a little bit of a quick background, because I've always said when we've been doing these webinars that part of the strength of what you bring to the table is you are a practitioner as well as a provider. You have that background as a practitioner, so you've walked a mile in their shoes, so to speak.
Yeah, thanks, Jon. It's a good introduction there. My background's an engineer, aeronautical engineering. Worked for Rolls-Royce and fell into procurement as a buyer. So working in one of the assembly shops to do all the kind of purchasing and invoice chasing and etc. And then I've had a varied career around consultancy, software sales before. We set up Market Dojo with a view to making solutions to help procurement with the kind of day-to-day activities and to help them master supply chain decisions. And our direction and our roadmap now is becoming really important. We're moving away from just virtual negotiation through auctions to more SRM type technology, looking at supplier onboarding, contract management, looking at the information. And from a perspective where I've come from a buying perspective, I know that in a procurement professional's job, it's a lot more than just negotiation or tenders. There's a lot of expediting in there, probably a bit too much expediting. But I'm a massive believer in the procurement role to become more strategic, and to do that we need to help clients make the day-to-day kind of grind a bit easier and make the data more useful. And so a lot of the drive at Market Dojo has been to take that information, make it in a more consolidated, concise format, so people can make more strategic decisions moving forward. And one of the things that it's great to have Jon here, who's been helping us kind of work with our clients and helping with the uptake of the tool. And I'm really interested to hear how Corne's found the tool and how he's using the tool, because I think a lot of salespeople will use a CRM system, account people a finance system, and procurement people should use a procurement system. And getting that adoption and uptake, I think, is really useful, given the kind of my background. I can see where the benefit is, but it's always a step between. You've got emails and spreadsheets, and you want them to move to a strategic platform. So this is really interesting for me.
Well, it's interesting, and I think it's safe to say that the view of procurement strategic importance have probably been forever changed given this COVID crisis, and recognizing the strategic role. I think this is the time for procurement to step up and assume a mantle of control. We always talked about historically being in the wanting a seat at the big table, so to speak, and all these things. I think we are the table. So, just on that light. So thank you, Alan. And just my background as your humble moderator, I'm the editor for Procurement Insights. I've been in the high-tech industry for 35 years and almost as long in procurement. And I've covered the industry extensively, spoken about it during that time. And it's fascinating to see how things have progressed from the early days of leveraging technology and moving away from those folded corners of Thomson Register or whatever else to sourcing suppliers to where we are today. But anyway, these panels are very interesting because they give a chance to really delve in deeply into how organizations work and function effectively, leveraging technology, but not only that, in terms of understanding how supply chain has changed. Now, let's go to the next slide here. And by the way, we didn't introduce him, but the producer, who is the quiet voice you may hear from time to time, is Toby. Toby, just a quick thank you for being there. I want to remind everybody that after the webinar, we've set up a tweet chat called Dig Success 2. And what that is going to do is we're going to use that as a medium afterwards to share some of the, there's a poll result we'll share and some of the highlights and points to expand discussion beyond that point. And so just make a note of that. We'll revisit that at the end as we move to the next slide. Three things we want to talk about. I want to introduce Irdeto because I've got to admit, Corne, and I apologize, but there's a ubiquitous presence of your organization that we don't know about simply because you're everywhere. In fact, we've probably all encountered you at one point in time or another and didn't realize who it was behind what we're doing. So we're going to cover that a little bit today because I think it speaks to the diversity and the complexity of what the organization does. Then we're going to go into the second part, which is leveraging procurement technology before the crisis, during, and after the crisis. Now, one of the things Ellen mentioned at the very beginning is that we found ways to provide understanding of how you could extract greater value. One of the biggest questions that I'm getting from everyone on the practitioner side is how do we extract more from our supply chain now? And many of them are viewing it, and many of you are viewing it in a whole new light of, hey, I didn't know we could do that. And I'm not talking about just functionality. I'm talking about the whole approach to supply chain and the procurement function. So we're going to get Corne's take on what they're doing with it before, during, and afterward. And then again, I want to revisit in that context the Market Dojo response relating to tying it all back in, and not only in Corne's instance, but in general, what this can do to help extract more. So let's without further delay, and there's the logo. And again, I never recognized the logo, but I recognize your presence now and everywhere. In fact, you're popping up everywhere. Toby, as we move to the next slide, let's bring that up a little bit and turn it over. Tell us, Corne, a little bit about the world leader in digital platform security, because I believe you started off in the media world realm of security on that area, but then have progressively, again, gained that ubiquitous presence or footprint globally. Tell us a little bit about Irdeto.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yes, Irdeto has been around for quite some time. In fact, we celebrated our 50th year last year. Originally, yes, starting off in the sort of video entertainment business, the pay TV, and it's grown quite exponentially over the years. It started literally from the founder's house, and it just grew and grew, and into a company that's multinational, presence in I think well over 13 countries, serving customers all over the world. One of the biggest actual initial customers, and it's just coincidentally that we ended up being part of the MultiChoice group, has been MultiChoice, and that was Mnet. It started many years ago with the Mnet TV channels, pay TV in South Africa, which has grown into DSTV and then the MultiChoice brand itself over the years. And we've basically been supplying or protecting the sort of digital platforms, starting with the smart cards, the encryption on the actual chips for set-top boxes, which has evolved into other more digital ways of protection. Irdeto has also expanded a lot in other markets, one of them being the connected transport. market. We've actually one of our fantastic big deal for Irdeto kicked off last year, and there's already a whole bunch of vehicles in production in China, and that's with Hyundai, where with their keyless entry, we're actually protecting their vehicles and making them autonomous. We also currently there's a heck of a lot of investment that's gone into protecting not just motor vehicles itself, but machines in factories, forklifts, those type of things. Because as the world evolves with technology, all these things become more clever as well. And yeah, there's room for issues if you don't protect them. And that's what it's about.
Sorry to interrupt, but one of the things that's interesting, because you moved from media to again the automotive industry, other areas, and the interconnectability. I mean, you know, I had the shipment of a stove not that long ago, and they're talking about the fact that remotely I can turn it on and off, and you have smart houses and all these things. I mean, this and you know, John, maybe I'll go to you just at this point. But with all this interconnectability, I mean, you have more points of vulnerability here, don't you?
Sorry, in terms of, was that for myself?
For you, John. I mean, in terms of your working with Irdeto and understanding where the company is going. I mean, these points of vulnerability are obviously something you look at, and having these, being able to support that infrastructure. I mean, when you first encountered and started to work with Corne, I mean, what areas were you looking at in terms of understanding what they were doing and the impact? Because there is a broad impact there, isn't there?
Well, absolutely. I think one just small reference for those as well, just before that, in terms of multi-choice, an easy way to explain it for those viewers that are in the UK is essentially think Sky, but a lot more advanced and covering the whole of Africa. But yeah, no, certainly I think there's multiple points, especially working with the company in security. That obviously we need to be extremely careful with everything that goes into the tool. When you're thinking about the setup of the tool, each element of it needs to be, I suppose, should have already been meticulously tested. I think potentially it was the right direction for us to begin working with MultiChoice first, to then moving across to Irdeto. But yeah, the impact that they have, especially right now in terms of modern culture, you know, each one of us probably have a contactless card sitting in our wallets that's always available. Keyless entry, my car, for example, is, you know, you can essentially just walk up to it, open the handle, and there we go. And you know, there's a lot of cases where those have been stolen in the UK. If the key is too close by, obviously, people get smarter as to this technology advancing, which means it then needs to advance further and further. So yeah, I think there's a lot of areas that need to be thought about.
Well, now, and just to go to Alan, and then we'll move on to the next slide and go into the specifics about supply chain. But Alan, remember we were talking about earlier your background with Rolls-Royce. I mean, one of the things that I gathered from doing the research to talk with you all today was the fact that expertise and understanding the complexity of what organizations are doing is something that you can bring, or you must bring to the table from the standpoint of being a provider, correct? I mean, like it's not just a matter of here's what we know with blinders on of a technology. It's also understanding the environment it's going into and understanding the impact on that environment. I mean, isn't that a key element of an organization who's providing a solution?
All right, Joe, it's sorry, excuse me. Lots of interesting challenges for a provider, because we've never really niched a particular industry or area. Procurement, indirect, direct, number of different categories. You know, everyone buys off with supplies, but for some people it's direct, some it's indirect. To look at buying a solution which is a SaaS solution, which means a multi-tenanted online solution, it's challenging, because you need to be able to cope for all these variety of industries. And I think the key point about SaaS is you provide solutions that are multi-tenanted. It's a single instance. However, it's got enough degree of customization within the tool, user customization, to be able to cope with the variety of categories and the variety of industries. I mean, one of the great things about working with all our clients and like Irdeto, you get to realize and see that there these huge companies out there that, and really important companies out there that you never know about, and then you suddenly start dealing with them, and as you say, you start seeing them everywhere, and you can see the importance of where things like keyless entries and security, where that's going moving forward in the future. Just reading one of your posts, John, the other day about, was it Zoom bombing or something? So look, security is becoming ever more important, and being able to work with new clients is a real eye opener, and it does. The challenges for Market Dojo and for all technology providers are really interesting, and I think you've just got to approach it from a true SaaS perspective by producing tools that are hopefully easy to use, but can be customized to give each client a competitive advantage over other people using similar tools.
Well, I'll tell you, that background I think is important. And as we move to the next slide, we're going to do a poll and present it to you, the audience. And this is really the whole formula for today's discussion. How has the current COVID-19 crisis changed the way you currently use procurement technology? Significantly, moderately, minimally, or not at all, or other. Now, I'm not sure what that other would be, but nonetheless, we put it in as an option. So I'll leave it out to the polling. But Corne, we're going to go into these three areas. So you mentioned something very interesting about your organization when you were talking about being remote ready. I mean, and the culture within the organization and the adaptability. That's probably a key starting point. But when you look at how organizations generally are going to respond to this, not only based on your own input, but just general market knowledge, what do you think the likely response is going to be? Is this going to significantly change the use of procurement technology because of COVID-19? What do you think?
John, it's a tricky one, because obviously, again, from industry to industry and company to company, it'll differ. When I just look at Irdeto, for example, I don't see it having a massive impact. I think we've always been quite diligent in using technology, and not just in procurement or procurement specific technology, just technology in a general, in our day-to-day lives. Like we discussed earlier, Irdeto has been quite well adapted to and it's probably a good thing. We've got a culture of working from home that is quite well sort of accepted, and there's a lot of people that do it on a regular basis. So it's not a new thing, although working from home all the time for a very, very long period has got its challenges. But from a technology perspective, I don't see us in general or it having a massive big impact on us. In fact, it's probably, if anything, it'll probably just help us focus a little bit more on how we can use it better and more cleverly.
Okay, now, so let's go. John, I'll go to you, and then Alan again. John, and based on your time and experience on here, what do you think governs the impact of technology in an organization? For example, how might this, in your opinion, cause people to view it or use technology different?
Well, I think from those that I've spoke to, and not naming any names, but there's certainly an element of where certain companies have been caught out without the information, especially with things happening like in the UK at the moment. We're having a lot of companies furlough people and obviously put them on 80% of their pay packet and just have them not work at all. Now, the issue with that is, if you don't know from one day to the next who may be furloughed at the next stage, that information that's stored in somebody's email or that you need to actually speak to somebody about is now gone because they're not working. So a lot of companies are realizing the information that they do need is not centrally stored. So the people that are still working have no access to it. And obviously that wreaks havoc on a supply chain. So I think that a lot of companies are realizing that without some kind of ability to have centralized information easily accessible to anybody that needs it, they've been caught a little bit short.
Now, okay, now I'm gonna take that because that's an interesting point, because visibility is obviously important. Alan, you know I've written extensively about the McKinsey survey, which talked about digital transformation of the supply chain. And out of all the 1,650 incumbent executives worldwide who were polled, only 20 or so percent had an actual digital strategy, and only 2% involved the supply chain. And on the other side of that, and I know this is a little longer of a question, a Deloitte survey came out in December saying of those organizations that digitally transform their supply chain or are moving in that direction, a small percentage, 80% aren't happy with the results. So I'm going to frame it in this question to you: is what impact will what we're dealing with COVID-19 have on that? I mean, you have, first of all, not a heavy adoption of digital transformation. And it sounds like Irdeto is certainly ahead of the curve on that regard. But those who have adopted are not realizing the results they had expected. What does COVID do in terms of this technology perspective? Does it facilitate more people looking at technology?
Yeah, I mean that's I mean at the moment from Corne's view there, I think Corne is ahead of the curve for looking at our current. I mean, if we start with our current users who have our tools, what we're actually seeing is an uptake in the number of events compared to and the number of tenders and number of activities compared to last month and this month last year. So that surprises us a bit that you've got that uptake, which is what you want, but not necessarily what you think you'd have. I mean, we look at technology as a whole and wonder, what's going to happen moving forward. And I think that there's an expression which comes back a lot recently about you don't buy snow tires in a blizzard. In other words, it's a bit too late. And what we're seeing at the moment is the companies that don't have this technology now, it's very hard to suddenly invest in that technology and get the benefit. Those that have it are using it more. I think the key thing to come out of this, and this is interesting, I mean, Corne did touch upon it, that they're finding this is how they can use the technology a bit more, is my firm belief is if more people had the right supply chain technology, then they'd be in a better position to react more quickly in times of crisis. My feeling and my understanding from speaking to people is the challenge in procurement at the moment, as Jon alluded to as well, is having access to that right information to make the decisions quickly. And I feel that a lot of clients without systems which are adopted and used within the supply chain, such as the suppliers involved in last tenders, what options they have within particular categories, what risks they're at with the supply chain and the supply chain, unless that information is ready at hand, it's more difficult for the organization to act quickly. And in times of crisis such as we're at now, you need to form a plan quickly and you need to act quickly. And those that don't do that on a daily and weekly basis, you can end up at a real risk depending on what industry you're at. So I think moving forward, I'd like to think that companies will learn from this and will invest in tools which will allow them to give them that visibility of information within the supply chain to better react to cases such as this. I mean, I think Corne is ahead of the curve. One of the points you made at the end there, Corne, was around it might give more indications of how the technology can be better used. I'd be interested on your views around that.
Well, you know what? It's interesting. We're going to touch on that actually, but Corne, if you can give us a little bit of an advance notice within some initial feedback on that, especially in the content of the results of the poll, how has it helped you to utilize the technology better where you could, as Alan posed it?
Yeah, I think we've taken early adoption strategy to look at all the platforms that we use and to sort of gear ourselves better so that I think, to be honest with you, a silly thing we did, because currently we actually right in the midst of a full-on ERP implementation as well. And actually the week before the Dutch government announced that they want to clamp down and get people to start working from home, we actually started doing some test runs because we sort of saw it coming. So for certain streams, we actually did a few test runs to see and test how our technology works, you know, and how we can all communicate, etc., etc. And is it going to work for us? And yeah, very shortly thereafter, the announcement was made, and the adoption it just was a natural thing for us. We just.
Now, is that by chance, you know, and I know we'll get into it specifically when we get into the adoption, going into the original strategy going in, but the poll results where 56% say it's moderately. And by the way, for those listening, if you care to share in the chat what you meant by moderately, or what specifically moderately means. I mean, if you look at this, Ellen, is it a surprise that 56% say it's had a moderate impact? Does that number seem high to you, or is there any surprises in these results?
I don't think so. I mean, I think there's been an uptake of certain parts of technology. You know, I'd like to think, you know, Market Dojo, we're a virtual tool to help people work remotely and based in the supply chain. So from that perspective, you'd think, well, you'd get a massive increase. However, what we're finding is the clients who have the tool are continuing to use the tools, and those that don't have the tools just in essence don't really have the time to go through that and don't have the money to suddenly invest with those tools. So people are using the technology they have at hand and you know, moderately increase the use of it, and those that are using it are normally making good forays into it. So I think that survey really reflects the inability for organizations to spend money on new technology to better handle this crisis. But I think moving forward in the future, I think it will certainly, organizations will be thinking harder about having this technology beforehand to mitigate risks and to enable the speed of mitigation.
Okay, now here's what I'm going to do. Corne, I'm going to go to you, and then John, I'll go to you on this. And this goes to the beginning, because Corne, one of the things you said is it hasn't changed for you because right out of the gate, you knew what you wanted to do with the technology. You knew how you wanted to leverage it effectively. And again, I'll go to you first, Corne, and then John. But is that the key to the adaptability of the technology, regardless of what the situation is, whether there's a COVID crisis or a change or whatever else? Is that foundation, is what you laid was a solid foundation first and foremost? Is that the reason why there's been minimal impact in terms of your technological strategy?
I think so, yeah. I'd like to think so, put it that way. Definitely. It certainly helps. Just planning for the inevitable, really. And it wasn't intentional. It just coincidental that, yes, we were ready when the crisis hit. But, you know, I think a decision that had been made, especially when it comes to procurement technology, that we really want to leverage the functionalities, you know, the benefits of what the tools can give us, just in a general day-to-day procurement organization, so that we can get the best results for Irdeto as a company, and obviously for us as a function within the business. So it wasn't a conscious decision up front that yes, we should plan for any unforeseen circumstance. It was just a culmination of things that worked in our favor, really.
Okay, now John, going to you, and from the provider side, I mean, if you Corne's and you know what, there's a certain thing of, well, it just happened. There's proper management, and it goes back to that culture, I guess. But dealing, without naming names, dealing with different clients and customers, John, I mean, is part of it the expectation of what technology can or can't do, or not having a good expectation of what it can or can't do? Like, how do you, as an organization, how do you assess the differences out there in the marketplace? Because obviously 56% said it's moderately changed it, which, you know, isn't significant, but certainly notable. I mean, what's the differences you're finding in terms of organizations, and what role do you have to play as a provider to have a starting point that's more in line with what Irdeto has done?
Sure. So I think, as Alan mentioned earlier, just being incredibly agnostic in terms of our client base. We have, you know, we could cover a very wide base of clients across all industries and organizations. Every single client will be different and wanting different things. And I think the reason why Irdeto and Corne are quite comfortable is because they already had a good understanding of what good procurement looks like, and it wasn't. It depends on focuses, because some will look at cost savings and primarily focus there. Some will just be looking at having centralized information. But for Irdeto, it was to have an accessible, but not even just in our system, but across all systems, an accessible, shared point across the team where they can access the information they need. And it wasn't, for a doomsday scenario, if you will. It was more just understanding that that is a very almost a basic need of procurement, especially in the modern world. Whereas other organizations, some that use us and some that are looking at using us and or have in the past, have maybe had more of a focus on, we just want cost down at the moment, or there is one specific area. And a lot of organizations are taking these baby steps and saying, well, we need to improve this first, and then we're going to take stage 2 and focus on having a centralized area of contracts and taking it in stages. But I think, fortunately for Irdeto, they're in a position where they were already quite advanced in those steps, so they could look at making sure that, just as a strong foundation, as you said, that there was information readily available across the team in a centralized working space,
Now,
especially
there's a certain area, because you just tweaked it, and I'm going to go to you, Alan, in a minute, but I want to go back to Corne, because you mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, that you were doing an ERP implementation at the same time. So obviously there's a great deal of collaborative effort there. I mean, is that potentially a benefit and a reflection of how well the organizations communicates and collaborates internally? Because I think that's a key part of success, isn't it? So did doing an ERP implementation at the same time sort of help to get everybody on the same page?
I think so, yeah. I think it laid the foundation, at least, and set the sort of scene for people to start thinking around how we work in the ways we want to work. Yeah, just so that everyone can start getting their minds into that sort of mindset. So yeah, definitely, it's helped.
Now, going, Alan, and don't want to date you at all, obviously, but we've been around a long time. I mean, there's a lot of expectations, and hearing what both John said and what Corne said, is managing the expectations from a provider standpoint key here? Because if they're looking just strictly, oh, well, we're going to cut costs, or unrealistic expectations of what technology can do, I mean, that's really the provider's role, isn't it, to say, wait, here's what technology should do? Like going back to the Deloitte survey from December, where the majority of CPOs are not satisfied with their digital strategies, which obviously isn't the case with Corne. But is a lot of it is that the expectations aren't managed properly right out of the gate, or there isn't the internal collaboration that's needed to make it happen?
That's an interesting one. I think that as a provider, we have a knowledge of what the technology can do for organizations if it is utilized correctly, and if it's utilized to its fullest amount. And I think it's every provider's aims and dreams to relay that to organizations, and I think organizations purchase technology based on what the art of the possible is. So that's kind of stage one. I think a lot of organizations, however, have invested technology, and the technology hasn't been a good fit, or they've underestimated the amount of work that needs to be done, or underestimated the training. And so it's really what part of it is the technology provider to demonstrating what is possible. But the real goal of the technology provider, through its people, the process, and the technology, is to enable those results to be captured. So it's very easy to sell a system that can do X, Y, and Z, but actually having a solution that can deliver X, Y, and Z in the end is really, really important for an organization. So we do a lot of training with our clients and try to get them to adopt the tools to get that benefit. So I think that careful design of the platform and the people's really important to deliver what the desire is.
So it becomes more, and John, I'll finish with you and then we'll go on to the next one. But John, I take it realistically speaking, and I'll use the term for Irdeto and what Corne's team has done, the scalability of success. As Corne said earlier, he said, I don't think we planned for it to happen and come together as well as it has. It just did come together. I find that in all the years I've been doing this, there's been the common thing of, well, we know we work, but it's just the way we do things. But that same thing, being able to make it scalable across an enterprise, because people who are joining us today are going to say, okay, well, if we're moderately changed or different, or we need to look at technology in a new way, I mean, how do we go about do it? Is the scalability there? And I'm talking about outside of the technology, because the technology obviously works and is sound across the board. How do you scale that?
Okay, absolutely. So I think we have numerous cases where we have clients that have gone from using us with one area of the procurement team in one country and are now using us globally. In hundreds of users, 80 in another organization, 150 in another, and essentially, yeah. So obviously the tool is very easily scalable. It's just getting people to log in, getting a username, a password, and allowing them to do their activities, and they can obviously manage their internal hierarchy. But then it's having a stable training foundation and support team available, because with each one of those users, you will need to obviously have them just feel comfortable in the system so that they're actually make use of it, and having all of the training materials and everything ready on demand, our YouTube videos that are now all over. And yeah, I think it's just having a plan in place ready to onboard them and make sure that everyone is feeling comfortable as a user. But yeah, we
Okay.
have quite a few cases.
All right, let's go to the present now, Corne. In terms of, and it's almost like you're set and ready for this from the very beginning, so that when the crisis hit, what, if any, changes have taken place in terms of the utilization of the technology and the strategy? I mean, it sounds like it's been very minimal, but that's because you built or you already had a solid foundation in place. I think that's the best starting point. Have the right foundation in place. Now you go into it. Is there any minimal adjustments that you've had to make, or any surprises that have come at you for your organization?
Long and short, no, there hasn't been. I think, if anything, and I touched on it earlier, is I think the for me a good takeaway from this is literally just to look back and see how we can actually, what we can do to just better utilize the tools that we're already using, to get more benefit out of it. That's really and it's not just, yes, the tools are fantastic, and don't get me wrong, but it's bigger than that. It's your approach on planning, your approach on how you want to tackle, for example, a category. It's all about planning and strategy, and what you want to have as an end result at the end of the day. And in line with that, that's also important then to use as a basis for selection, tool selection. You need to have a end goal to sort of drive what your tool's going to be supporting you to get to. So yeah, I think for us, very little impact at the moment, and I don't foresee it changing drastically over the next couple of weeks, months. However, the only thing that I can say is that we're probably going to definitely look at, just the things that we've been doing good or okay, to do them brilliantly.
Elevate the game, so to speak. Okay, now let's go to this next one, beyond the crisis. And we're hearing some things, and we talked earlier in the virtual green room, it could be a matter of months. Some are saying that the overhang of this could last to 2 years with a secondary and tertiary wave. Not that there'll be the lockdown that we're presently experiencing in different parts of the world, but certainly the graduated return. Looking at your strategy, and if I'm not mistaken, Corne, it's the company strategy first, and solidly in place, and then leveraging the right technology. That's the process that creates the continuity throughout change. Where do you see technology and leveraging this going in the future? How is this going to change strategy? Because procurement's obviously going to be, and supply chain is going to be elevated to a whole new level that it hasn't been before. Where do you see leveraging the technology going forward after the COVID crisis has passed?
Yeah, I think leveraging it beyond this, because this crisis is going to open up new realms for us, new things that we never knew existed, and it's going to change the way we did things. Maybe for decades, is going to change drastically. So I think using the technology and leveraging the technology to tackle those stumbling blocks and those challenges going forward, yeah, it's going to be crucial and important. And I certainly think that from a procurement perspective, it's definitely going to make us rethink and reevaluate the way we've done things in the past. Certainly engagement with our stakeholders, with our suppliers. It's going to change fundamentally. So yeah.
All right. So now let me take that question to Alan, and then I'll go to John. There's been projections that the economic decline and return are going to be like a check mark. But what's going to happen as a result is many of the upstream suppliers that have existed before will no longer be in business. In fact, an article in the New York Times projected that that businesses that were on the cusp of struggling and sunset industries, as they call it, will not exist after this. They call it paving the way for the next generation. I mean, as a provider, how do you respond to that? Are you already looking ahead into what those changes might entail, and how you'll respond to that?
Yeah, it's. I mean, you can't get away from the fact that consumers are essentially hibernating, that they're spending less, they're doing less. That's going to affect the B2C businesses, and that's going to impact B2B businesses. And that, every day that we go on in lockdown is, probably a week or so in issues to come. There's going to be a lot more debt going around from a government side, from the bank side, from having loans, etc. And I think you're quite right. We're already seeing that the businesses on the cusp are struggling as we go. In terms of how Market Dojo are, looking at that, it's a bit early to tell. We're really trying to help the current clients out there. We're kind of provide information to see how other people are finding success from using our tools. I mean, we work in the supply chain, we work virtually, we're like perfectly positioned to help people, and we are helping people. And in terms of how our business model will change moving forward, I don't think it will change per se as as the makeup of the suppliers and the customers change. I think we've certainly understood from this crisis the need for that ability to work virtually, and the need for people to share information and have the supply chain information. We've got a big drive on at Market Dojo to look at more SRM scorecarding, to really give information to help clients master supply chain decisions. So I think one of the things this crisis is doing for ourselves is really focusing our vision, which is really around that kind of supply chain information, really focusing it so we can help clients obtain the information faster and then use it. I mean, we talked a bit before about people being sold technology and not getting the adoption. I think that adoption, that use, and helping clients get to the vision that we know is possible is where we're going to be focusing.
All right. So, and John, hearing what both Corne said and Ellen had said, from your perspective, interacting with clients on the front lines, and in the context, let's say, revisit what Market Dojo is doing with regards to the COVID-19 and the RFI capabilities. I mean, how do you see it changing in your approach to working with clients? I mean, are you beyond the technology, because I think you said something very true. I mean, the technology is scalable in and of itself with proper training and onboarding, but it's the client perspective and the mindset of being ready. Do you have to do things differently to help the clients or prospective clients to see technology in a different light?
Well, absolutely. I think first of all, providing the clients that we are speaking to flexibility in terms of how we look at beginning the process of working together. And secondly, there certainly is everyone's kind of pulled back in a lot of scenarios. There are still some businesses and companies that see now more than ever there is an opportunity here, and so we are seeing new clients still appearing, but there's certainly been an almost a hibernation among a lot of those that we speak to, and so I think there's more of an approach of just being quite sensitive towards what may be happening in that business, because every industry is affected differently. And then with all the lockdowns in the world at the moment, obviously there's every country in the world has different moving parts. So the UK may come out of lockdown while another country's going in, while another country's in the midst of it, and it's trying to be sensitive towards what is happening in their country, but also in their industry across the world, which is proving quite challenging, and you need to be quite articulate at the moment.
Okay, now before I go to Corne, because I want to get one more thought here before I forget, because I want to talk about what happens when everything starts getting turned back on again, and not every country is going to turn on at the same time, so to speak. But Alan, going back to the response you had with the RFI and what we've talked about at the beginning here, I mean, you identified a particular need to extract greater value. I think, John, you said hibernating to a certain degree, which translates to me, if I'm not mistaken, is that we're not expanding our acquisition or utilization of technology beyond what we have. We want to utilize and extract greater utilization. In that context, Alan, I mean, this RFI, are there other things that are going to come down the road from you as a provider to say, as we adjust, here's other areas that we can help and assist with this?
Yeah, I think clients are, they've got the initial hit. They've done risk analysis. They've looked at their payments first of all. They looked at the supplier contracts. They've looked at what's critical, what's optional, what's non-critical. They're trying to manage their cash flows, and for that, the risk RFI was fantastic to allow clients to understand their position, and I think that's certainly a first point of call. Moving on from that, we're starting to see now with the kind of initial foray is over, people are becoming a bit more organized about their procurement activities. I think one of the words we're looking at is options. Obviously some clients are more affected than others, and some people's supply chains are more affected than others, and some clients now are looking to, once they've understood where the risks are, to run more tenders using our e-sourcing tool, because the great thing about e-sourcing is you can look at more options more quickly, not just around pricing, but around testing people's supply chains, about delivery, etc. And then I think once we move on from that, the next stage will be kind of focusing more on cost. We'll probably be seeing a few more auctions being run again. And then I think the final phase when we start coming out of this will be around supplier onboarding, make sure we're de-risking ourselves for the future or for a second or third round of COVID related issues or other issues in the future. So I think the first stage is like, okay, we need to understand the problem, and then we're looking at using our tools to find solutions for the problem. We've got tools to manage people's contracts, tools to manage people's onboarding or category strategy or running tenders, and I think we'll see a lot more day-to-day work and then strategic work moving forward. I mean, I'll be interested as well on Corne's view about how he feels procurement will be seen within the question for you, Corne, how you feel procurement will be seen in the organization at the end or moving out of this crisis. Do you think their profiles will be elevated?
Absolutely. Excuse me. I think now in any procurement organization is the time to step up the game and to show your worth. If there's for many years in all procurement organizations, there's been talk about costs reducing, so I think the focus will probably change more towards around a bigger solution, is not just focused on cost, but end to end. How can you as a procurement organization support and enable the bigger group or the bigger organization to, number one, deliver goods on time, get what they need on time, and just to, obviously, yes, cost is obviously a factor as well, but to add value, that's the main thing. And it's going to become I think, more and more crucial. For example, with the Irdeto, we had obviously our financial year kickoff conference call on the 1st of April, and Irdeto has taken a very, very sort of pragmatic approach where they've taken a firm stance to say that for now, the company as a whole, we good generally. We don't foresee any imminent job losses because of the current situation. However, there's other measures we're taking to make sure that the company stays viable and can still continue to do business going through or into the future. That said, if the current situation has another flare up, we don't know how that's going to affect us. And I think that's the key thing is that's where we need to focus on, is if and when that does happen, is how are we set up to deal with it and to add value.
All right, now here's the thing, and I just want to remind everybody in terms of talking about that, just sharing with the entire audience a link that Market Dojo has with tips and ideas in terms of dealing with COVID-19. One question, and we want to be able to wrap this up in a couple of minutes, Corne. When we look at going forward, when we look at the future, is it safe to say that the success with dealing with crisis, you can't anticipate, no one could have anticipated COVID-19. Obviously, supply chain interruptions have been around, but more localized. I mean, is it safe to say the three stages are, first of all, having a clear and sound goal and objective as to what you want to accomplish right out of the get-go, including a culture of collaboration and communication? Then looking at the technology and having realistic expectations of what you can and cannot accomplish with it. And three, is it safe to sum it up by saying is going forward, there's always going to be the unknown, but you have to have the resiliency, the adaptability to be able to recognize where those risks, when they arise, and have a strategy in place for dealing with them. I mean, is that the safe way to say of how Irdeto has gone through this? I mean, I won't say unscathed by it, but certainly there's been a level of consistency throughout that. I mean, is that a reasonable takeaway?
I think, yeah, you've summed it up fantastically there, John. It is definitely, it's been the key for us to help us through this crisis, and not just from a procurement perspective, from a company perspective as well. When I talk to some of my peers within the organization, and hear how their business units are doing, and how this has been affecting them. It's to the similar scale. We, as a company, fortunately, we've been well prepared, and yes, obviously it did have some impact. But I think also on the flip side of things, for us as an organization, this has had a positive impact as well, because forcing people to say, what do you do? You turn on the television, right? So we've on the flip side of that been benefiting, where our customers have had a bigger demand for our solutions. So it's also not to always just think around how if something like this happens, look at how we're going to mitigate and deal with the negative side of it, but is also looking at the positive side. And I think that's the key takeaway is there's always on a whichever way the coin falls, is going to be a positive side as well.
Perfect. Well, gentlemen, listen, thank you so much for your time today. And again, I want to remind everybody, the tweet chat will continue not only after the webinar, but beyond that point, we will share the poll results and seek feedback and further discussion. The hashtag is DigSuccess2. But I just want to, again, start off by thanking you, Corne, for joining us, Alan, of course, and John. It's a pleasure to have you for this first time, hopefully the first of many time. And I just want to thank you all for listening today. You will have access to the on-demand version, and we'll be making it available as well. Share it far and wide, because I think that if you have any questions, please direct it, because I think Irdeto has a great model for success in collaborating with Market Dojo on that front. So without further delay, again, Toby, thank you, and then turn it over to you to wrap up.
Bye all.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.